we came across comments in 1992 about assaults of women. So this is an issue that's been around a very long time.
I interviewed hundreds of patients across the institutions. One of the questions I would ask is, have you had anything traumatic happen to you while you were in hospital? And a number of women had indicated that they'd been raped either by staff or other patients.
I've had friends who've been raped in hospital and they've ended up suiciding.
There was one case where one woman said staff nurse had sexually assaulted her, and she was ignored and not believed until 5 other women gave the same story.
I mentioned to a bloke down there, I'm filming tomorrow, we're going to be filming a group of men discussing the issues around single-sex wards. And he said, oh yeah, I had a mate who was a drunk and he'd voluntarily get himself committed because it's the only place he could get sex.
And so, you know, it's fine for nurses to say, oh, don't worry about it, he's sick, he's just a male patient, you've got to expect that sort of behaviour. Well, no, we don't have to expect that sort of behaviour, and it can have tragic repercussions.
And you know, like, we're mentally ill as well. We don't go around sexually assaulting people, sexually harassing people.
About 70% or 80% of the women, as you know, who are in the units have experienced previous sexual abuse.
And when you get back in the system having had abuse in your past, things can get triggered. Being held down by 5 or 6 security guards is a standard part of experience. If somebody refuses to do something, and I can't imagine what that feels, except I know that I'd sicken to my stomach if it happened to my daughter.
You know, men can be subject to assault, but it is nowhere near as prevalent for them as it is for women, and you've got to prioritise.
Men have said, well, you know, they don't want to be in the situation where they have done something when they're disinhibited and unwell, and then have to cope with the horribleness and the consequences of that later on as well.
Yeah, well, I was almost hesitant to tell Sue that story. And as soon as I did, she told me a very, very similar story about another bloke she knew who did exactly the same thing, but he was actually diagnosed with a mental illness. He wasn't an alcoholic. And she said that he'd masturbate in public in order to get committed, so then when he was in there, he could have sex.
With such a high percentage of LGBT people having mental illnesses, 42% of the transgender population have attempted suicide at some point. 42%.
I've had terrible homophobic experiences from both staff and patients.
If the purpose is recovery, it makes no sense to me to heighten people's stress by placing women in mixed wards where they are not only forced to endure the unwanted invasive medical treatment and the accompanying loss of autonomy that goes with that, but to also be fearful of some victimisation, assault, or simply re-traumatisation by being exposed to people who they fear.
It'd be great if we could get the politicians, bureaucrats, to put themselves in the position of being a consumer on an inpatient unit as a female.
It seems, a pretty clear duty of care to do whatever you can to protect people from sexual assault when they're in a healthcare environment.
You go in there for treatment, to be healed, and instead you come out traumatised with post-PSTD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You come out with more problems than you went in with.
Yes, I agree, and the thing that I find most disturbing is that we are still seeing the same issues now that we saw 30 years ago in the big madhouses like Larundel. Nothing has changed.
The fundamental problem, which is women are getting sexually assaulted in psychiatric care. So that needs to stop. Obviously gendered wards, female-specific wards is one way to do that.
So I think we do need women-only wards. We will only achieve that with extra funding being put into the system to enable this to happen.
From a human rights perspective and from a common decency perspective, we think women should be entitled to receive and expect treatment without fear of victimisation, sexual assault or re-traumatisation, and we don't see that can be delivered without women-only psych wards.
If we don't pay attention to women's mental health, then everyone loses, because this is everyone's mother, daughter, sister, wife, and it's about the future of the next generation as well.
It's a bit like people who are at their most vulnerable being thrown into a fire instead of being given a nice soothing drink of water. And it's just wrong.